اوكي شربيل، بس بدك يانا نبلش قلنا.
I don't know if our speakers are here already. So we have Marielle, we have Noor. Dr. Mabsout.
And Miss Lady Habshi from UN Habitat.
Yes.
Okay, and we still have Mr. Muhammad Diab from Afrijwa. بعد في محمد ننترو.
Okay, so Marc from Afrijwa will be speaking with us.
اوكي لكن رح يكون مارك بدل محمد دياب. اوكي رح بلش انا. اول شيء بدي اتشكر الUSJ والAUB على هالانيشيتيف، على الايفنت. اليوم الجامعتين عم بيفرجونا انه التعاون بيناتهم بيصير مش بس على صعيد اكاديمي، بل كمان على صعيد وطني، على صعيد طلابي، وعلى صعيد حياة اجتماعية. بدي ارحب بكلمة سريعة بالموجودين السبيكرز تبعنا يلي هن 5 قبل ما بعدين نفوت بالديتيلز معهم. عنا لكان مارك توربي ممثل عن جمعية أفرجوا، عنا مس ليدي حبشي ممثلة اليو هابيتات، اكسبرت بالليدرشيب وبخبرة سنين بتنظيم NGOs. عنا دكتور منير مبسوط بروفيسور بالهندسة المدنية بالAUB وأحد مؤسسين السنتر اوف سيفيك انجيجمنت اند كوميونيتي سيرفيس بالAUB. عنا ماريال بطرس من الUSJ en mission، ونور حبيب تلميذة أزيب بتمثل سيلول اوبيراسيون 7 جور تبع الأزيب والفايس بريزيدنت تبع ASC. أنا مارك عودة تلميذ ميدسين 5 سنة، ورح أكون اليوم المودريتور بهيدا البانل. موضوعنا نحن اليوم حيكون الكونستراكشن، وموضوع الكونستراكشن هو موضوع فعلا مميز، لأن نحن بنعرف يعني من بعد الانفجار كل العالم نزلت حطت جهودها، اشتغلت بالتنظيف، بتوزيع الأكل، بتوزيع الأدوية. أما موضوع الكونستراكشن هو يمكن من المواضيع الوحيدة يلي بعدها لليوم ماشية. هو موضوع كتير sustainable، بيتطلب كتير funds، بيتطلب يد عاملة، اختصاصيين إن كان مهندسين أو معلمين أو يد عاملة. فهيدا رح يكون موضوعنا لليوم. بالنسبة للبلانينج نحن معنا تقريبا 3/4 ساعة. السبيكرز فيكم تحكوا بالعربي أو بالإنجليش مثل ما أنتم بترتاحوا يعني. رح نقطع هلأ على كل شخص لحاله، نشوف البرزنتيشن تبعه هو شو محضر لنا، مين بيمثل وشو جاي يخبرنا مفتوحة يعني، ونسأل شوية أسئلة ونطرح نقاش. Ms. Habshi, I will start with you. You are our special guest for the day.
Hello everyone. Thank you. So I will just turn on my video. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So just so you can familiarize my face. So my name is Lady Habshi. I'm the project support officer heading the urban governance unit at UN Habitat. So I will share my screen now, and I will turn off the video just for the issue of the connection. And once you can see, please, my screen, if you can just confirm.
Yes, of course.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just to introduce a little bit about UN Habitat, since UN Habitat established its presence in Lebanon in late 2006, its operation in the country have primarily focused on responding to successive crises the country has underwent. Let's say starting with July 2006, the reconstruction process was really massive and required enormous coordination efforts at all levels. So UN Habitat was there to initiate a housing reconstruction project that aimed to support the municipalities and all the local authorities in southern Lebanon. Going to the Syrian refugee crisis, UN Habitat was also able to support the host and refugee communities. They were able to conduct capacity building for municipalities, in addition of rehabilitation of shelter and upgrading of basic services. I will be talking later on the COVID-19 pandemic and the Beirut port explosion in the coming slides. So UN Habitat usually they do their intervention through integrating normative tools into operational implementation. And here I would like to focus more about the neighborhood profiles that are conducted and developed and published by UN Habitat in coordination with UNICEF. These neighborhood profiles are reports containing original specialized data and analysis generated within an area-based framework, which can respond to the evidence needs of several sectors. Talking about the distribution, about the COVID-19 pandemic and UN Habitat intervention and how we were really involving the youth. So from different local NGOs, the youth or volunteers involvement was to identify the families that were in need to be supported by hygiene kits relevant to the response on COVID-19. So the youth were really involved to list the families, to have some distribution of voucher and to provide some kits, in addition of implementing some awareness session for the families. Local NGOs in Beirut and Tripoli, they were really involved to visit door to door the families and to do all the intervention. Talking about the Beirut port explosion, so UN Habitat started with the first initiative was done when we did the rapid building level damage assessment in the areas affected by the explosion, mainly Beirut and Bush Hammoud. So we called for students and volunteers from universities like Beirut Arab University and local NGOs to support UN Habitat in the assessment. They were trained on application survey to assess the exterior situation of the buildings. The finding of the assessment it served to inform the ongoing blast response, recovery, and reconstruction of the impacted areas. Other project related to the Beirut explosion, we supported 100 vulnerable families in restoring their houses that there were damaged. So again, a student from Lebanese University with architectural background, they visited the houses in Nab'a and developed a list of damages and what should be repaired. And also they supported us in developing the detailed BOQ. So at a later stage, it was provided for contractor to go to work on the construction. There is also a project to ensure shelter options for the most vulnerable families whose housing situation was affected by the Beirut port explosion. So this was related to provision of cash for rent for the affected families, and especially the unsound buildings or the buildings that were risking for collapsing. So UN Habitat, through also volunteers, they were able to identify these vulnerable families, to do some socioeconomic or vulnerability assessment to come up with really the needed or the families in need, whereby we provided them with cash for rent for 4 months. Rehabilitation of private schools damaged by the Beirut explosion. In coordination with UNESCO, Lebanese university student or Lebanese University Task Force, architects and engineers, were also they supported UN Habitat to do assessment of schools to see what are the damages and to develop the BOQ. And they were also supporting us to supervise or monitor the work of the contractors during the implementation. I will brief a little bit about our methodology, how we usually mobilize or involve the youth. Usually, whenever UN Habitat has any intervention in any community, besides having the municipality as a basic partner, the residents also, or the community also, they have a role to identify and prioritize their needs. So a selection of local committee representative is needed. We start by having a TOR to identify what is the role and the structure of this local committee and what will be, what will be their involvement. And of course, under this local committees, we have a good let's say representative from youth, from women, from gender, of course respecting the gender issue. So because for us we know that these people, they are the only people they are the only person who know about what are their needs and what are their priorities. Also during our work, we do capacitate the skills of youth because, as I was saying, they have really the thought, or sometimes they have the vision about their community and about their needs. So I just I took here only 2 examples. We already engaged some youth in having training on Minecraft design because we wanted to help us in designing a public spaces. So this training was really empowering them to have some vision for the spaces within their neighborhood. In addition, we have some local youth and from host and refugees, males and females, were able to generate income through their direct engagement in executing simple labor tasks. So we provided them with vocation training on electrical wires rehabilitation or minor repair, and by providing some cash for work. This is my last slide. UN Habitat, as I was saying, we usually work very closely with the municipalities or union of municipalities, whereby we do establish a regional technical office or municipal social cell under the union or the municipalities, so they can support or empower the role of these local authorities in planning, designing, coordinating, or mitigating social and protection. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Habshi, for your intervention. I just have one little question.
Yes.
Ms. Habshi, you are well known for your vision, your leadership, and your future strategy. So can you tell us about your future plans or your future perspective for the construction process in Beirut?
Well, now we are working very closely, as I was saying, with the municipality of Beirut and the governor, and we're trying to, and we have several projects, of course, after the Beirut explosion, which some of them are ongoing, or some of them are still new, and we are trying to really discuss what is the plan of the municipality and the governor, what are the plans with of the other stakeholders, because after the explosion, too many partners, they went and they wanted to, let's say, rehabilitate or to do or to work, but we missed this coordination. So we're trying as UN Habitat within the municipality and the governor and within other partners to really have one common vision, one planning design. So we just to avoid the duplication and to avoid the overlapping of the work, because we saw this and we faced several challenges during the after the explosion, and during the response of our response or others' response, we missed the coordination. So we have a list of projects or list of response, and others they have but the coordination is still missing in this issue.
Okay, so thank you very much. We will move on now to Marc. Marc Torbay.
Hello, Marc.
هاي مارك، فيك تحكي بالعربي أكيد إذا بتحب، يعني إذا فيك تخبرنا شوي أكتر عن جمعية أفرجوا، عن دور هالجمعية يلي اشتغلته بإعادة الأعمار، وأكيد يعني عن تجربتك الخاصة بالموضوع.
أكيد. أول شيء Marc, thank you for considering أفرجوا and for inviting us to this panel. ومرسي على يعني دايما بتفكروا فينا. لازم أقول إنه فرح العطاء جمعية لا سياسية لا طائفية لا حكومية، تأسست سنة 85 خلال الحرب الأهلية، وكان هدفها إعادة بناء الجسور بين المناطق اللي تفرقت عن بعضها، من خلال بلشوا بمخيمات أطفال يجمعوا أولاد من كل بيروت. بعدين تطورت الأمور، بلشنا بورش إعادة أعمار، إن كان المناطق الأكثر فقرا بلبنان مثل باب التبانة وجبل محسن، ولا إن كان بسجون للدولة اللبنانية. رممنا 7 سجون من أصل 21، ومدارس رسمية كمان على كامل الأراضي اللبنانية أكثر من 21 مدرسة، وطبعا كمان تدخل من بعد انفجارات صارت وكرايسيس ريسبونس. لازم وضح انه كل الاشخاص اللي قطعوا بخلال 35 سنه لهلا كانوا متطوعين. طاقة فرح العطاء هي كلها طاقة شبابية تطوعية لشباب وصبايا بيجوا من كل مناطق لبنان تيشاركوا بنشاطاتنا بشكل تطوعي. واليوم من بعد انفجار 4 آب فينا نقول انه عندنا قصة حلوة نخبرها. بخلال كل هال 35 سنة وبهالانفجار بالتحديد كمان كان دايما في تنسيق مع الجامعة اليسوعية ومع جامعة الأيوبي لحتى يكونوا تلاميذهم عم بيشاركوا معنا بالنشاطات، واجا جروبات كتير كبيرة من USJ وAUB، وفي منهم ضلوا معنا على الأرض أكثر من 3 أشهر. اليوم شبيبتنا بعدهم على الأرض من 4 آب لحديت هلا. في أكثر من 300 شاب وصبية من لبنان استلموا هذا المشروع على عاتقهم، وهلا رح أحكي عنه. بس تقلكم قد ايه الطاقة الشبابية فيها تعمل. نظموا كل شيء، اشتغلوا مع بعضهم، شبكوا مع بعضهم، حضروا الورشة مع بعضهم، وبعدهم لهلا على الأرض. صار قاطع أكثر من 4500 متطوع ومتطوعة من لبنان ومن العالم. أكثر من 15 بلد بالعالم جنسيات اجوا شاركوا كمان بالورشه، وبعدهم الشباب على الارض لحديت هلا. اليوم المشروع تبع فرح العطاء بعد 4 آب يتضمن إعادة أعمار أكثر من 6 شوارع بمنطقة الكارانتينا ومنطقة مرمخايل، تيشمل هالشي 56 بناية عم نعمرهم ونرجع نرممهم، مع فوج إطفاء بيروت اللي دمر بالكامل واللي قدم 9 ضحايا بالانفجار، وأيضا كنيسة سيدة النجاة ودائرة السير ببيروت. وقت عم نحكي شباب عن 56 بناية، عم نحكي عن يمكن شي شركات عمار ومتعهدين اجوا شافوا شو عم نعمل وقالوا لنا انه هن شركاتهم ما فيها تنفذ مشروع بهالكبر. عم نحكي عن ورشة ضخمة، عم نحكي عن يعني أكثر كمان من 250 عامل محترف كمان عم يشتغلوا تنقدر نكون عم نلبي، وعم نحكي عن 13 مهندس كمان متطوعين صار لهم 8 أشهر على الأرض لحتى يكونوا عم يتأكدوا إنه الشباب عم يشتغلوا بأكثر طريقة إفيكاس. اليوم ما حدا من هالشباب اللي اجا لا معلم بطون ولا شاغل بالطرش ولا بيعرف يعمر حيط ولا عنده الخبرة انه يعمل اي نوع من الاعمال الهندسية. اجا تلاميذ من كل الاختصاصات حطوا ايدهم، بنستقبلهم، بنعطيهم اول شيء كل الكوفيد ميجرز. نحن ب 8 اشهر 5000 شخص قطع، الحمد لله ما عندنا ولا كورونا كيس، لانه كان عندنا مثل هيلث ستيشن بتاخذ الحراره، بتعطي كفوف، بتعمل بتسلم ماتريال، بتستلمه، بتنظفه، بتعقمه، الى اخره. بنرجع بنعطيهم الاغراض تبع الشغل تنحميهم من كاسكات من جان. بنرجع بيتوزعوا على نعمل لهم ديسباتشنج على البنايات اللي عم نشتغل فيها، وبيكون في شباب وصبايا بيستقبلوهم، بيفسروا لهم شو عم نعمل، ودغري بيكونوا عم بيقدروا يساعدوا. نعمل شغل جبار. المنطقتين اللي عم نحكي عنهم هن على بعد 300 متر من موقع الانفجار، بالتالي هن مدمرين بالكامل، كانوا يمكن الأكثر تضرراً، والكارانتينا هي من المناطق الأكثر تهميشاً في لبنان. لازم نعرف إنه هالست شوارع من بعد شغل 8 أشهر عم نحولهم من الواقع اللي هن فيهم لشوارع نموذجية في بيروت رح يصيروا. نحن بندعيكم كلكم تجوا تتفرجوا، تعملوا برمة تشوفوا شو صار. رح نسلم شوارع نموذجية فيها لاندسكيبينج، فيها ريسايكلينج، فيها إنارة على الطاقة الشمسية، فيها تروتوارات مثل ما لازم، فيها بنايات روتابي مثل ما لازم. حتى عندنا 7 بنايات أثرية كمان عم نعيد ترميمهم حسب الأصول تنحافظ على التراث اللبناني. هيدا كله شباب أخذ شغل وأخذ وقت وأخذ اجتماعات وأخذ سهر ونحن عم نتعلم. يعني ولا مرة فرح العطاء كان عندها سكوب هالقد كبير تدير هالقد مشروع كبير، وبذات الوقت تدير هالسبورت اللي اجانا من كل بلدان العالم بشكل يعني ما شفنا منه قبل. وهذا كان مسؤوليتنا انه نوصل كل هالمساعدات للاشخاص المتضرره من الانفجار. وبحب خبركم انه في شباب وصبايا يعني بكل لبنان عملوا لنا فند ريزرز وساهموا ننشر المساج تبعنا بانحاء العالم، وقدرنا نجمع اكثر من 3 مليون دولار تقريبا للورشه تبعنا. وفور ترانسبيرنسي حطينا كل ارقامنا على السوشيال ميديا وعلى الويب سايت تبعنا، وكل فتره وفتره بنعمل امباكت ريبورت تنفسر شو عم نعمل وين صرنا بالورشه تبعنا. وفيري سون كمان رح نكون we're publishing another impact report بخبر وين صرنا. شباب هيدا كله بعتقد مهم كتير لشباب وصبايا لبنان، مش من كرمال الورشة. كان فينا نجيب متعهد يمكن يعمل الورشة، بس المهم كان شغلتين. المهم انه نكون عم نوقف حد الناس ونقول لهم انتم مش لحالكم، نحن كلنا سوا مع بعضنا. وهيدا موديل بعتقد لبنان بيقدر يقدمه للعالم. ما في بلد بالعالم بيصير في انفجار شباب بيجوا ناس من كل المناطق وبيقعدوا 8 اشهر على الارض بيشتغلوا وبيعمروا. هيدا السوليداريتي اللي بيناتنا بتتعلم. على القليل لبنان بعتقد عنده شيء يعطيه للناس، ومش بس بأفرجوا. كل الجمعيات والمؤسسات اللي اشتغلت على الارض من بعد الانفجار عطت سوليداريتي بين اللبنانيه وبين الشباب اللبنانيه باحلى صوره ويمكن لبنان عنده يقدمها. فهيدا واحد. واثنين، كان مهم تيشوفوا الشباب انه وقت يشبكوا مع بعضهم ويشتغلوا مع بعضهم بيقدروا يعملوا تغيير. ما ضروري يكونوا بأعلى المناصب، ولا يكونوا بمراكز مسؤولة، ولا يكونوا ولا مطرح. وقت يقرروا شباب لبنان ينهضوا ببلدهم، بعتقد في اكزامبل كتير حلو انعمل لشو بيقدر ينعمل. سوري طولت عليكم. ثانك يو سو ماتش.
ميرسي كتير مارك، عن جد يعني كتير انسبايرنج اللي عم تحكيه، كتير بيكبر القلب. وبدي أعلق على موضوعين بس قبل ما انتقل حبيتهم كتير بمداخلتك. هو موضوع منطقة الكارانتينا، لأن كنت عم بتقول أنت أنه هي منطقة مهمشة، وشفناها أنه فعلا كانت مهمشة بالكويك ريسبونس، لأنه العالم نزلت أكتر على الجميزة وعلى مرم خايل، على المناطق اللي هي بتعرفها مزبوط ومعودة عليها. وشغلة حلوة أنه رجعتوا أنتوا توجهتوا على الكارانتينا وعمرتوا فيها. وشغلة تانية الشفافية كمان، إنه عم تنشروا كل شيء عم تعملوه والحسابات وهالأمور على السوشيال ميديا. فعن جد ميرسي كتير، والله يقويكم، إن شاء الله بتكفوا بهالهمة.
ميرسي مارك.
اوكي، رح ننتقل هلأ عند بروفيسور مبسوط. دكتور منير، دكتور مبسوط معنا؟
ايوه. عم تسمعني؟ تسمعوني مارك؟
يس
اوكي. بتصور اللي عم نسمعه صار يمكن عم بيكمل كل القصة، ما بعرف شو فينا نزيد، بس يمكن نقدر هون نحكي أكثر أنا بالذات يمكن AUB-USJ كمان عن شغلنا كأكاديميين ضمن الجامعة، وكيف نحن قدرنا نعمل المبادرات يلي قدرنا نعملها. هلا أنا كنت يمكن محضر هيك نقط بالإنجليزي، بس على طول بحب أحكي بالعربي، ما كنت عارف إنه فينا، بتصور الكل بيقدروا يفهمونا. طيب، اول شيء كان في فيديو يمكن بدنا نحطه يلي هو بدل برزنتي، هو دقيقه الحقيقه، بس اي ثينك بدل ما نحكي
بدي اطلب من شربل بس. نعم،
اذا في مجال
بدي اطلب بس من زميلنا شربل عاد نعم يحط الفيديو.
يس، بلخص الشيء ان شاء الله يمشي مزبوط. نحن مهمتنا نشوف الأبنية بشغلنا مع نعلم التلاميذ، بنفس الوقت كمان عندنا شوية خبرات عملية تنعطي نصائح أو تنعمل تصميم أو نعطي نصائح بالأبنية.
I would like to see it restored. The government is making it impossible for us to dream about it even because we don't have the means.
They wanted assurance. They wanted us to notify them that they're safe, that their house is their house one day.
الأولاد بنتي عندي بنتي لأنه بيتها راحت ما بينقعد، إنه مسؤولية، وجوز بنتي كمان بالمستشفى، إذا ضفر الولد صار له شيء مسؤوليتي. هلا فديت الأوضة خفت، بس قال لي المهندس بس هلا طمنتوني كتر خيركم. الحمد لله الحمد لله.
اوكي سو يمكن بديها بتلخص كثير اشياء من الشغل الفعلي اللي عملناه على الارض يلي هو بحجمه، يعني هذا بحب شدد على هالشيء. هلا انا بدي بالوقت القصير اللي عندي بدي اجرب اتطرق للموضوعين الاساسيين يلي هن الشغل الفعلي اللي صار، ويمكن الفكره الاكبر يلي هي شو دورنا ك يمكن جامعات، ودورنا بحب اقول المحدود بهالشيء كجامعات، طبعا محدود بطريقتنا. اول شيء نحن اول شيء انا كثير يعني لي كثير بتعني لي انه اكون هون، لانه رجعت مع عائلتي، اذا مش رجعت على طول كنت معهم، بس انا بطلت عم دير المركز مثل قبل، فهلا هيك حاسس حالي مع الناس نفسها، وكل الناس معظم الناس يمكن بعرف اساميها. اللي بقدر اقوله هون انه نحن عم ننطلق من فكره ريكونستراكشن، بس هي كلمه كثير كبيره علينا لنا بالذات. نحن هون كل شيء عم نعمله بالجامعه، ونحن ضمنا اللي بتشوف البوست ديزاستر بيلدينج ستراكشر سيفتي، هيدي مبادرتنا نحن الخاصه ككليه الهندسه والعماره، وبالذات ابتدت مع القسم الهندسي المدنيه والبيئيه مع عده ناس بالفاكولتي بالفاكولتي واللي كثير اشتغلوا مع بعض. واهم شيء هي المنظمه الطلابيه، يعني AUB-CCECS اللي هلا عم شوف في نور حبيبي يمكن هون، يلي هن يعني بالمبادره كلنا مشينا سوا، وطبعا تحركنا كثير بسرعه يمكن بدون تنظيم بالاول مثل ما كل الناس صار. هي بحب اتطرق لها بالاخر، بس فعلنا شغلنا الفعلي هو مثل ما كان محدود، هو لا شو اسمه نشوف السلامه العامه تبع الابنيه، تنطمن العالم بخبرات المتواضعه او اللي عنده خبره اكثر. كلنا تعاوننا وجربنا نوصل الخبريه، لانه انت فيك تضل ببيتك، انت لازم تعمل هيك. وهذا الناس اللي كانت عطيني همه بالاول قبل ما نبلش نعمر، ضلني ببيتي او لا. وكان في كثير عم بيصير في تدخلات ومداخلات، وناس تجي تقول فلوا وما تفلوا، فنحن كان عندنا هدف متواضع تنقول، وما قادرين نحن حتى نثبته، لا بنقدر نعطي لا شيء مكتوب، لانه نحن ما عندنا المسؤوليه الفعليه انه نقول هالشيء. نحن جامعه ما بدنا نتحمل المسؤوليه اكثر من مبادراتنا الشخصيه والفرديه، وهذا كان كثير واضح. نعمل هوت لاين كانت الحقيقه فعاله، يمكن قدرنا نشوف ككليه نحن حوالي 200 مبنى واعطينا الاراء فيها. هلا هيدا الشغل كان ضمن الجامعه، انا بحب اقول انه نحن كان شغلنا كلامي، بس كان في كثير متعاونين بالجامعه عم يشتغلوا مع بعض او بتنسيق او بتناسق. بقدر اذكر طبعا المركز الالتزام المدني، السنتر فور سيفيك انجيجمنت، الاربن لاب يلي كان عم بيامن كل البلاتفورم مشان الخرائط والمساحات، مبادره حسن الجوار، وبعرف في كمان خضة بيروت، واكيد انا ما عم بقولهم كلهم، بس اللي بحب اقوله انه نحن كلنا يعني مشينا سوا بس من دون ما نعرف، التقينا كلنا يمكن على الارض. وصرنا اخر شيء نعمل تنسيق بين بعضنا، ويمكن انتهت القصه انه مثل ما هلا هذا الفورم متخصص بالبوست ديزاستر بالبلاست، صار في كورس كامل عن بالهيومانيتيريان والهيلث انجينيرينج هلا عن هالموضوع عم بينعطى هلا، يلي هو بينعطى على طول، بس نحط هذا الثيم. هيدي بدي احكي فيها بعدين كفرصه، انه فرصه اللي هي الحقيقه من المأساة اللي بتجي ايام ناخذ فرص، بس مش لسبب مثل ما بيقولوا استفاده رخيصه. هلا يعني هيدي كثير بحب شد عليها، لانه كثير نحن اشتغلنا على الموضوع قبل. فبالنسبه يعني للثيم الاساسي اليوث موبيلايزيشن، يمكن نحن هون كثير بنحكي وفينا نحكي كثير، بس اللي شفناه على الارض بلخص كل شيء، وكل اللي قبلي حكوا فيها، يعني ما حدا نطر حدا، لا اليوث ولا مش اليوث. يعني كمان بحب اقول انه ما كانت على الارض ناس يوث، كان كل العالم، وهيدي بنحب نحن نقولها بلبنان على طول، من كل الملل ومن كل المناطق، هيك حتى نعملها وحده وطنيه. بس كان فعلي هالشيء كان صحيح، يعني ما بدنا نهرب من الواقع، هذا اللي صار. كنا نشوف ناس من كل المحلات ومن كل المؤسسات ومن كل المنظمات، وكان في اول شيء شويه فوضى بطبيعه الحال، بس شيء طبيعي، بالعكس هذا كان شيء منيح، انه يعني ما حدا ناطر حدا، وكل الناس نزلت، وكل المنظمات NGOs الحكوميه والغير حكوميه. هلا الحكوميه طبعا مش بسهوله يعني، بس كمان كان في الهيئات المعينه اللي معروفه عملت اللي عليها، يمكن في كثير ناس ما بتحب الطريقه اللي بيشتغلوا فيها، بس اتليست تواجدوا بما فيها المنظمات يلي
بروفيسور مبسوط، بس سوري عم بقطعك، اذا فينا شوي نختصر بس كرمال الكل يلحقوا يحكوا.
يس بعد في دقيقه او دقيقتين. سو هلا كنت عم بقول انه كلنا تنسقنا ونزلنا يمكن على الارض. بس الاساس نحن هذه يمكن نهايتها، نحن كاكاديميين كجامعه شغلنا منا لا NGO ولا مؤسسه تعنى بالريكونستراكشن. طبعا نحن بدنا نحط خبراتنا، بس اللي نحن بنقدر نعمله هو المبادرات هي تخلي تصب بالسياق الاكاديمي تبعنا. يعني نحن بهمنا انه شغلنا يتطرق يوصل المسج للتلاميذ انه انتم كمان لازم يكون عندكم مسؤوليه اجتماعيه، وهيدا هدف يمكن اللي اجى منه السنتر فور سيفيك انجيجمنت. ويمكن هيدي اللي بسميها فرصه، للاسف مع كل مأساتها بدنا نحولها لفرصه حتى نستفيد منها، تنعرف كيف نتعامل بالمجتمع وكيف نشتغل. انا برجع بس تنهيها لل 2006. يمكن الفرصه هيدي اللي اجت بال 2006 اللي كانت مأساة بكل معنى الكلمه كمان، هي خلتنا نأسس المركز الالتزام المدني، نحدى من الاشياء اللي اسستها. فمن وراها صار في جهوزيه، وهيدي هي هون انا بحس انه الموبيلايزيشن بدها تجي من وراء تواصل بقلب الجامعه وتكامل مع المجتمع باللي بتقدر تعمله كجامعه، لا اكثر ولا اقل. اوكي، فيمكن من هون بحس انه لازم نوصل لشيء يلي بوصلنا على المجتمع، بس ما لازم كمان نحن ناخذ المبادره من الناس اللي عم تشتغل برا ونقول نحن كل شيء. نحن كل شيء بنعمله بنقدر نأمن لطلابنا الفرص تيكونوا بالواقع موجودين. انا بحب اذكر كمان جلوريا عم تعمل لي هيدا، بس انا بتذكر كمان انه كيف نحن عملنا سنتر فور سيكيور انجيجمنت. الساتيام جور يا جلوريا بلش من وقتها، انا بتذكر وكلنا تعاوننا وقتها اذا بتتذكري من وراها. فهيدي اللي بحس انه جامعات لازم تتواصل مع هالشيء. نقابه المهندسين كان دور كثير كبير بالموضوع كمان، بقصه الريكورد، بقصه الاسسمنت، تعاوننا معهم. يمكن اشتغلنا شوي منفصلين، بلشنا قبل، بس عن جد في جهود كانت صارت الكل. اكاديميا انا بحب اوصل المسج، نحن هون دورنا، وهون لازم يكون واضح وين نحن وين نلتزم وقديش فينا نلتزم. هي مهم كثير قديش، لانه ما بدنا نعطي شيء ما فينا ننفسه. اذا نحن بدنا نلتزم كجامعه ما بدنا نحكي حكي على الفاضي، نحن على الارض بدنا نعمل شيء على الارض نعمله قد حجمنا. شكرا، وبعتذر اذا اخذت شوي وقت زياده.
ميرسي لك بروفيسور، وسوري قطشناك بس لانه وقتنا شوي ضيق. بدي انتقل هلا لعند ماريال بطرس تحكينا شوي عن الدور اللي لعبته الUSJ en mission بالريكونستراكشن. ماريال معنا؟
اكيد، اكيد معكم. نحن كUSJ en mission كان حكي شوي ترشبلي باول بانل. من بعد بيروت بلاس دغري بلشنا كول سنتر. بهذا الكول سنتر اتصلنا بتقريبا كل الكوميونيتي USJ ان كان اتشيديان او موظفين. دونك اتصلنا فيهم لكل الاشخاص يلي عايشه بالمنطقه يلي تاثرت ببيروت بلاس. ومن خلال هالاتصالات نحن بين عنا شويه حاجات، سورتو الحاجات بالريكونستركشن لحتى نقدر نعمر شوي مع العالم ونكفي شوي معهم. بس شفنا هيدا الحاجة نحن عملنا أبل كل الفولنتيرز، وخاصة الفولنتيرز اللي هن انجينيرز، إن كان يلي مخرجين من الأزيب من هون من الجامعة، أو يلي هن بعدهم بالكاتريام أني سانكيام أني وحابين ينزلوا على الأرض ويكونوا عم بيشاركوا. التارجت الأول كان على القليلة نقدر نساعد الأشخاص اللي اتصلنا فيهم وقالوا لنا شو هي الحاجة يلي عندهم، وهيك صار. تقريبا بعد يومين من البلاست كان في اكيبات من 70 فولنتير انجينيرز عم بينزلوا على الأرض يعملوا assessments. من بعد هدول الاسسمنتس كان عم بينشغل شوي على الBOQ، نشوف شو حاجه كل بيت ونقدر نبلش فيه. صار في كتير اخذوعات او كوبيراسيون مع جمعيات مثل نوساند مثلا، وان ميم طون صار في كول لدونرز لانه كنا بحاجه كمان لفاندز، واكيد بنعرف نحن بالكونستركسيون الكوست هن اكبر والفون بده يكون كثير اكبر حتى نقدر عن جد نعمل شغل يساعد العالم ترجع على بيوتها. وهيك صار يعني وانس انعمل الاسسمنت والBOQ بلش الشغل. صار في انجينير هو مسؤول عن هيدا الدوسيه، هو مستلمه، ونحكى كمان متعهد معه اكيد تيم عم بينزلوا على الارض، بلش ينأخذ كل بيت ببيته وينشغل. الفكره كانت من الشغل على الارض هي انه نقدر هالبيت يرجع يصير ابيتاب، يعني تقدر هالعائله ترجع تعيش بالبيت، بمعنى انه مش بس نسكر ازاز او نحط حيط، بمعنى انه اذا قدرنا مثلا نظبط الحمامات، نظبط المطبخ، نطلع البيت بالاخير قادرين يرجعوا يعيشوا فيه مرتاحين ديسكوتاب يعني، بس انه يقدروا يرجعوا يعيشوا فيه، العالم والعائله تقدر ترجع على بيتها. صار في كتير تشالنجز خلال هالباركور. من اكبر التشالنجز بتخيل هن الفاندز يلي هن الدونرز، لانه مثل ما قلت هالبروجي بده كتير، بس انه كمان رجع تامن الفاندز وقدرنا نامنهم يعني بالمصاري، من كان ناس من برا او دونرز هون بلبنان، دونك تحلحلت هيدي القصه. كمان من التشالنجز يلي واجهناهم هن الفولنتيرز، لانه باول جمعه او جمعه ونص من البلاست كانت العالم كلها على الارض وكان في عدد كبير من الفولنتيرز، بس من بعد هالوقت خلص يعني اللي رجع على شغله او يلي انه خفت الهمه، لانه اكيد دائما على ضغط الكريز بيكون الواحد عنده همه اكبر، وقت اللي خفت شوي الهمه صار في نقص بالفولنتيرز، وصار هيدا كمان تشالنج تاني عم نرجع تو اوفركم ات. من التشالنجز كمان هن الكونستركسيون اللي كانت معموله بس معموله غلط، يعني فتنا كتير على بيوت حتى نقدر نرجع نشتغل ونرجع نعمر. كان في قصص مش مزبوطه، بمعنى انه مثلا الحيط معمر بدون امدادات، فهيدا كان بيضطر منا انه نرجع نهد الحيط او نرجع نكسر فيه حتى نقدر نمد، او مثلا الازاز يلي مركب بطريقه كمان مش كتير مزبوطه، كمان اوقات كنا عم نضطر نشيل نرجع نركب، فهيدول كلهم بيعرقلوا او بيزيدوا الكاست، ومن التشالنجز يلي واجهناهم. انطو اي بورتو نحن مثل ما قال برجاد قبل، كنا عمرنا تقريبا يعني ساعدنا بتعمير تقريبا 53 بيت ببيدجي تقريبا بين 61 و 65 ألف دولار. فوالا دونك هيدا الشيء اللي قدرنا نعمله. ان شاء الله نكون قدرنا ديجا نساعد عيال ترجع تعيش ببيتها وقد ما فيها تكون ألاز، لانه بالنتيجه هو البيت يلي رح على القليله يعطي شويه سكيورتي للاشخاص.
ماريا ميرسي كثير عن جد، ويعطيكم الف عافيه انه بعد عندكم همه لهلا تبقوا على الارض، وانه عم تشتغلوا بالاشياء الصعبه وبالورش يعني بالشغل المضبوط. بدنا ننتقل هلا لنور حبيب.
Wait, yeah. Ok, vous voyez le PowerPoint?
Oui, ça va, Nour, فيك تبلشي.
Yeah, je vais parler. Okay, I will speak in English and in Arabic. Okay. مثل ما قالت ماريال، نزلوا التلاميذ من ال USJ engineering students. They also went to the homes of staffs and USJ students with the team of psychologists and medical experts. And as for the work of the civil engineering faculty, we did damage assessment. Experts from the civil engineering faculty from AUB, teachers, accompanied by students, offered free consultation to citizens whose homes were damaged. Many reached out to the hotline, and many teams were put in place to go and check out the buildings. Also, we had a team of students from the engineering faculty, a member of the ASCE-USJ student chapter, accompanied a French expert to scan buildings in damaged areas. The students were trained on how to use the laser scanner and software, and they performed 3D scans and photogrammetry for damaged historic buildings, various monuments, and they had the Chilean rescue team during their mission in the Marm Khayel building and scanned the grain silos at the port. And this is a small recapitulation of the work done. And
اوكي نور، ميرسي كثير. هلا نحن بعد عنا بس 5 دقائق حابب أنا أطرح فيهم سؤال تنستفيد، لأنه عندنا بروفيسور مبسوط ونور أخصائيين يعني بالعمار وبالهندسة، ونحن هون عم نحكي عن Reconstruction. ونور هلا حكيتي عن عن إهراءات القمح، إنه عملتوا لهم سكانينج. كان بدي أنا بس أسأل سؤال، كونكم أنتم أصحاب خبرة، ولأنه كان في كتير ناس عم بيسألوا على السوشيال ميديا إنه شو المواد اللي كان معمولين منهم إهراءات القمح هالقد كانوا قوايا وهالقد قدروا حميوا يعني قسم كبير من بيروت من الانفجار، مع انه كان المبنى الاقرب على العنبر رقم 12. وهل إهراءات القمح نحن فينا نرممهم او لازم نهدمهم ونرجع نعمرهم عن جماعة عن هيدا الشغله؟
اوكي، رح جاوب بس على البارتي اللي انا بعرفها. يعني الاهراءات هن كانوا زيحين انه quand on les وقت we did the scanning they were leaning 20 centimeters. The expert with us said that they would not it's not safe to keep them and they will have to be destroyed and removed in a safe way.
اوكي نور، ثانك يو. بروفيسور مبسوط، بتحب تزيد شيء؟ بروفيسور مبسوط اوكي، بعتقد بطل معنا. أنا بعد كم دقيقة
الو
يمكن
سوري بس كنت عم يمكن
إيه.
كنت عم بقطش شوي. انا اصلا كنت عم بقطش كثير. كنت عم بقول بالمختصر انه كل شيء بيترمم. في كوست اذا بدك ترممها للمبدا، فيك ترممها وفيك اكيد تشيلها وتعمرها. اللي صار انه حمت، لانه هن اساسا الستركشر المعموله هن سيلز وسيلز سيلندريكل وكثير قويه، وهن معمولين يكونوا قويه. في كثير دراسات انعملت على الموضوع بالجامعه العربيه، في اساتذه من زملائي عاملين دراسات وببلشت بالاي يو بي، في دكتور ميسا، دكتور صلاح صادق، دكتور ميسا دبغي، وتيم معين مع إلينوي شغالين على الموضوع. بس اجين ما في اي يعني الكوست يمكن بيكون ما بيبرر انك ترممهم الا اذا اسباب ثانيه الواحد بحب يستعملهم، يستعملها مشان انه يتركهم موجودين مثل ما هن كسمبل. بس then probably ما ضروري ينعملوا كإهراءات، ما في سبب يكونوا تحت الإهراءات اصلا. يعني هيدا يمكن غير خسرنا بغير موضوعنا. اوكي
بروفيسور، بس بعد معنا دقيقة كنت حابب أسألك سؤال كمان. حضرتك كنت شاغل على publications عن البريدجز والهايويز، ونحكى كمان هون بهيدا السيشن عن البيوت القديمة والمباني القديمة الموجودة ببيروت. كنتوا عم بتشوفوا إذا في خطر بالنسبة للجسورة أو للبنايات أو للطرقات، يعني بالنسبة للمستقبل هل في خطر إنه يصير في هبوط فيهم؟ هل نحن بحاجة لنرممهم أو فينا نهبطهم ونرجع نعمرهم من الأول؟
عم تحكي عن الجسورة بالزيت ولا الأبنية القديمة؟
كلهم تقريبا، كل شيء ممكن يشكل خطر. يعني
بالنهاية الإحصاءات انعملت وانعمل شو اللي عنده أكثر خطورة. وأنا بقول لك العدد اللي لازم يعني يا نزل، إني عدد كتير قليل نزلوا إذا بدك تسميه بالنسبة للعدد الهائل اللي انصاب. هولي اوريدي راحوا يعني إذا بدك، بس هن كتير محصورين. واي شيء ثاني اذا بدك تحافظ عليه فيك، بس في كوست. يعني اذا بدك تحافظ على شيء تراثي بده يكون يمكن يكلف اكثر. واجمالا في كثير ابنيه تراثيه حمت حالها لانه هي معموله بطريقه انا بسميها هي قلعه من الاساس. فكان حتى الدامج فيها حتى لو موجود ما بيأثر عليها كلها سوا، لانه هي كلها سوا انت مكون واحد، مش انه اعمده ومثل هيكل عظمي. فما في اي سبب ما فيك ترمم اي شيء، كله بيرجع شو بدك. واذا الناس يمكن في ناس بتهمها تشيلها قبل، في ناس هي بتهمها تشيلها حتى لو إلها لانه عندها اهداف ثانيه. بدك تيجي تعمل هون انظمه، وبتصور في كثير ناس عم يشتغلوا بهالموضوع يحطوا انظمه مدنيه تراثيه حتى ما يخلوا هالشيء يصير بشكل اعتباطي. انا عم بقول لك في كثير ناس سمعتهم قال لا خليها هيدي ما بدي اياها، انا بفضل تروح، بركي بياخذ تعويضات عليها. الجسوره ما فيش مشاكل بالجسوره حسب علمي، حتى لو في مشاكل بيكونوا اسهل ترميمهم، لانه بيكون بس محصورين ببعض المكونات، يعني بعض الاعمده وبعض شو اسمه السلابات او البسط تاعتها.
اوكي بروفيسور ميرسي كثير. نحن بدنا نضطر نوقف لانه مشان ما ناخر السيشن اللي جايه بعدين. بدي اشكر كل الخمسه سبيكرز اللي كانوا معنا، وريكاب بس سريع عن الامور الحلوه، انه اليوم استفدنا من خبرات المهندسين، وشفنا كمان انه من بعد ما انسحب عدد كبير من الفولنتيرز عن الارض يلي كانوا موجودين باول انفجار، انه لا بعد في ناس مكمله رغم تشالنجز الفاندز وهالاشياء، وعم بيشتغلوا بأمور شوي كبيرة وشوي موسعة أكتر، وصاروا كمان حتى عم بيديروا وعم بيعملوا ورش. يعني يا ريت كان عنا بعد وقت زيادة نتناقش معكم، ومرسي لحضوركم جميعا، ومرسي لشربل كمان زميلنا شربل عاد اللي عم بينظم هيدا الإيفنت.
Merci.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the program. I guess we can kick off our third and last panel for today. We have Lynn. Hello Lynn. So Lynn is going to be our moderator and I'll give you the floor. I hope it's a panel that interests to everyone, and yalla, courage. Lynn, you are muted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hi everyone. So thank you so much for joining us again, and thank you, Sherbel, for the introduction. My name is Dabbous from the Center for Civic Engagement and Community Service, and I will be moderating this session, which tackles the issue of restoring cultural heritage post the Beirut blast. After the tragic loss of human life, Beirut's heritage stands as another hard-hit victim, where around 640 structures were severely damaged, especially in the historic districts of Jemmaizeh and Marib Khail. While humanitarian needs were immediately met, the restoration, protection, and preservation of the cultural heritage are key factors for the long-term recovery of the city and its people. Bearing that in mind, many organizations and individuals were mobilized to act immediately. Some of these active actors are present with us today to share their experience in response to preserving Beirut's cultural heritage. But before we dive in our discussion, I would like to briefly introduce our speakers. We have Dr. Claire Malleson from the Department of History and Archaeology at AUB, Mrs. Joy Kanaan, an architect, a member of the Arab Center for Architecture, and an activist representing Beirut Heritage Initiative. And last but not least, representing UNESCO, we have Dr. Chiara Dezzi Bardeschi, coordinator for the cultural program within the Beirut Initiative. Throughout our discussion, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box, and at the end, we will open up the panel for the speakers to answer your questions. So, Dr. Claire, you're here with us.
I'm here.
Hello, Dr. Claire. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction about you. Dr. Claire holds a PhD in Egyptology and worked for multiple international archaeological projects before finally joining AUB as an associate professor. Dr. Claire, you've been with the AUB, you've been like among the first AUB community members who were actively involved, and you volunteered and worked closely with the CCECS on the ground. So we're more than excited to hear about your personal experience and your insights regarding public awareness on Beirut's endangered heritage. So the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you. I apologise, my lighting will change again in a moment as the power switches back on again. So my apologies for this. So like many people who were in Beirut on the day of the explosion, I very quickly realised that I wanted to get involved in helping, not only, as Lynn says, with the humanitarian side of things, but really just doing whatever we could to help those who'd been most affected. I knew also that I wanted to be working with a recognised organisation, and of course, apologies, I looked to AUB, the university that I'm a part of, to find something to get involved with. And the call from the CCECS came out very quickly, and immediately, as far as I understood, there were many, many people offering to get involved. And my general impression in the first 2 weeks was that there were really hundreds and thousands of people getting involved. The streets around the affected area were filled with people who'd arrived to come and help. And this was really a sense of getting involved on the part of as many people as possible. And for myself personally, and for many people, helping was our way of coping with things ourselves. But as an archaeologist, as soon as I was on the ground in the area, it was in fact a part of Beirut I've not spent much time in prior to the explosion, I became really aware of not only the obvious damage to the more famous, let's say, Instagram-worthy cultural heritage buildings in Beirut, the ones that we are familiar with and were familiar with before the explosion. And obviously the damage to these buildings is catastrophic and is being dealt with in really commendable ways, really impressive ways. But what struck me was the fact that there were many buildings that I learned were not registered heritage buildings. And the loss of these, or the damage to these buildings, and the rapid repairs that were taking place in these buildings, that was really needed, but people were taking immediate measures and using methods and materials that were not really appropriate for the buildings, just in their need to repair the building and their obvious lack of financial ability to pay for the skilled work that was really required. And it was these buildings that struck me the most, because it's all very well having several beautifully preserved famous cultural heritage buildings, and we have many of these in Beirut, and they are incredibly valuable for the heritage of Lebanon and the region as a whole. But in fact, they are just, you might say, the icing on the cake. It is the underlying general heritage of the whole area that, to my eyes, was somehow dissolving quite quickly because of the financial situation, and because they didn't seem to be as valued because they weren't so famous, shall we say, and maybe they didn't have specific unique features that needed particular protection. And understandably, many of the people who were occupying these buildings, the most pressing priority was making the building safe or possible to live in again. But it was at, to my eyes, a great cost to heritage. And as I continued working with the CCECS, I became more involved and started talking to team members, not only the many students who were getting involved, but also the organisers of the centre, about this need to protect these unregistered buildings, the ones that are not so readily apparently cultural heritage buildings. So we started trying to encourage people to keep certain architectural elements. We could see that things were being thrown away, shattered shutters from the windows, these kind of wooden architectural features that were very heavily damaged, but possibly restorable, possibly repairable, but obviously at some cost. So we started trying to look at encouraging people not to throw these away. And then when the centre gained some funding to work within one building, this was something that we made a point of keeping hold of and aiming to not just fix the windows and doors and make the property habitable, but actually restore it to using similar materials and keeping the aesthetic value of the building in order to maintain the heritage of that building. And as I said, it wasn't a registered, recognised heritage building. So as an archaeologist, and particularly as a non-Lebanese, non-Mediterranean origin archaeologist, I come from a part of the world where there is a very clear set of regulations for these kind of buildings, and there is in fact a ranking system for all buildings that might possibly be considered heritage buildings. And it's not just a binary, this is a heritage building, you have to restore it perfectly, and this is not a heritage building. It is a more of a sliding scale of ranking. And so this determines what can and cannot be done to the building, but it also importantly actually has an impact on the property value. And obviously property value in Beirut is often to do with the value of the land, not so much the building on it. And talking to the students who were involved in the team and talking to people on the ground, I was curious about the sense of heritage in the area, but actually then I started to think about whose heritage is this? It's all very well someone who an expat who's only lived in Lebanon for a very short amount of time to come in with an opinion about the value of these buildings, looking at them with the eyes of the outside world perhaps, and saying these are important, you mustn't damage them. But actually it was very obvious that people just want somewhere to live, and that they did in fact have a will to want to maintain these features, but not the financial ability, and also then the lack of skilled workers to undertake the work, which is something that the CCECS is now looking into investing in, is training craftsmen to do this work. And in fact, that's another point that I felt was really highlighted for me within this area, was the fact that the people doing the repair work, doing the construction work, the carpenters, the glaziers doing the glass fitting, the people doing the plastering of the walls, these are just considered to be workers, construction workers. There is no level of, or what I sensed, there wasn't a sense of respect for the skill of these workers as being integral to maintaining the cultural heritage of the region. And again, from the part of the world I come from, craftsmen who are able to work using traditional methods and traditional materials are actually highly valued and able to command higher salaries and payment than those who aren't. So I think it's, in a strange way, the explosion, although it's caused obviously unmitigated damage to the city, hopefully has actually brought the idea of cultural heritage into the minds of more people in and around Lebanon. So in fact, we may start to be able to move towards a point where it is valued more and people are have the motivation to invest more in these things and value the skills of those kind of workers. And hopefully the many, many young people, and it was so many young people who were involved in this work, will have seen this and really start to value the heritage and want to hold on to it as part of their identity as being Lebanese and Beiruti.
Exactly. Thank you, Dr. Claire, for mentioning how heritage doesn't only lie in a few selected famous buildings, but it's more in the small details and features that is woven in the district of Beirut itself, and even in the craftsmanship and the cultural heritage itself. Mrs. Joy Kanaan, I know that you've been extremely also involved in heritage preservation. Sorry for the noise.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm going to just present a quick overview of our work at the Beirut Heritage Initiative, where we're obviously heavily involved in the rehabilitation and reconstruction of Beirut's built heritage post August 4 blast. As a continuation, sorry.
I'm sorry, can you hear me properly?
Yeah, it's a bit lagging. Can you hear me well?
Yeah. I was asking you about how the initiative started, how it's a collective of professionals, the objective, and the current works that you're doing on the ground.
Absolutely. So obviously right after the blast, there was a sort of chaos and total panic, and everybody jumped in to come up with some ways of actually saving whatever's left of our built heritage. And so this coalition that we called Beirut Heritage Initiative was basically born to manage and to put together entities, whether they're NGOs or craftsmen or whatever, you know, people within this heritage framework, to kind of come together and kind of restore and try to build and save whatever was left of our layers. Primarily, that we identified our heritage into two sections of into the timeline, basically, where we started with our traditional heritage being built between 1860 and 1930, and the more modern heritage, which is not officially recognized as heritage yet, which is between 1930s and 1970s. So these are the more modern buildings. Such, I mean, I'm going to cite the L building, although, like you just said, there's a whole layer of buildings that are extremely valuable in terms of heritage and features that are just considered to be mundane, but to us they are extremely valuable and worthy of saving. So basically the BHI is formed out of the committee, and we currently have identified several clusters that we are working with in Jemaise, Mar Mkhail, Mdawar, and the Rumail areas. And we realized that working in clusters, which is basically a combination of several buildings and that are basically tied either between with stairs or walkways, the approach to actually working with these clusters is a lot more efficient. So currently we have about 5 clusters that we're working on, starting with the shoreline, which is in the area of the gathering, and the blue house that you see from the highway, and the Amnazih, 2 buildings that were extremely damaged. Then we move up to what we call the Mulberry cluster, which is right facing the L. And further down, we have the Ghulam cluster, which is right at the cusp, or at the connection of Armenia Street and the street right below, basically. So these are several buildings where, for example, with the Ghulam cluster, there are, it's a cluster of 5 different buildings. One of us where the BHI is redoing, while the 3 others we're doing in collaboration with Together Beirut. It's an NGO that has been also heavily involved in the reconstruction and of these buildings, traditional architecture buildings. So we collaborate with many different NGOs. We don't refuse anyone's help as long as they are qualified and as long as they have the right tools. So we are constantly collaborating with NGOs such as Dabbous, Live Love Beirut actually has done tremendous work with us. If you've seen maybe the first few buildings that we actually put a roof on top right before the rain. These were actually done in collaboration with Live Love Beirut, where their volunteers actually went up on the roofs that were completely collapsed, and we put on the actual shelter. So the sheltering and propping phase was the emergency phase that we just came out of right by the beginning of the rain period, and so the whole portion of that, the whole objective was to shelter and prop these buildings so that they don't collapse. Unfortunately, quite a few of them collapsed with the first rains, and we lost quite a few that way. But that period, we were, collaborating with Live Love Beirut and Dabbous a lot just to seal these houses. Now that we are moving into the second phase, which is the rehabilitation, protection of certain features, we are working a lot with, for example, Together Beirut, and trying to bring people that are specialists, which is very, very difficult, like Dr. Malleson just said. We have the materials. We know we are historians, we're architects, but we don't have the artisanal knowledge to recreate and redo a lot of the features that we see, basically, such as some of the moldings, such as building techniques. We use now a lot of cement plaster instead of lime plaster. As you know, in traditional architecture, the windows were mainly Atrani wood, which was imported from Turkey back then. Now that we got some in-kind donations from Turkey, the wood turned out to be too young and too soft, so we could not use it very often, and we had to find other ways. So there's constant questioning of going back and forth about how much do we have to hold on to what used to be elements of traditional architecture. Can we do with something else at this point to better respond to our environment at this point? How much of a leeway do we have? How much do we allow ourselves to actually change certain things in this case of emergency and no funds? Our biggest hurdle and biggest challenge is the fact that there are no funds. The very
Ms. Joy?
Surgical operations here and there to safeguard whatever we can purposes, and it was mainly directed to the human layer to kind of re-shelter a lot of the inhabitants that were basically that had to leave their homes, and so the main objective right now when the donations are pouring in is actually feeding families, supporting them, rather than pouring it onto the architectural heritage. So rightfully so. I mean, the country is in a dire situation, and our built heritage was already heavily compromised before the blast. So on the upside, I think there is what we're feeling now. I mean, we're getting a lot of support. We are managing a lot of these different entities to kind of create and preserve whatever is left from our heritage, and we are very hopeful. On the upside, like I said, there is a surge in the awareness and the need to protect and to rehabilitate our built environment, architectural environment. I think this has made a big difference because we're getting the support. We're getting a lot of volunteers are helping us. I mean, we couldn't do without them. There are genuine people out there really supporting us and the reconstruction efforts. So if there is an upside to the situation, is that now there is a recognition of our modern heritage, which is the post-1930s buildings. And that was somewhat non-existent before the blast. So, I mean, we had an attitude that, okay, we have some arcades and a few features. Okay, this building is actually classified, which is not the case. We have very few buildings that are actually classified. Not as many as there should be. Hopefully in the future this will change to preserve these entities further and include the modern period, which goes up to 1971, right before the new laws, construction laws came in. So on the upside, we are very hopeful because there is a general awareness towards this need for rebuilding and preserving the cultural layers and the human layers that used to inhabit these buildings. And when we talk about the Source Palace or certain large-scale buildings, they're immediately recognized. But now we actually realize that Beirut contains so much heritage that needs to be preserved, built heritage. And for us at the BHI, our main goal right now is to move from the diaspora as supporters to the international community. who would be sensitive to this act of preservation and to help us out directly with the reconstruction of many different buildings. I do want to mention that the Blue House, which is right in the shoreline cluster, which used to be, it's right on the Shah Al Hello highway, which used to have sea view before the building of the highway and the extension of the port. It was heavily destroyed, and because it is considered to be somewhat on the seashore, it was actually completely adopted by the Honor Frost Foundation, which is a foundation that aims to preserve maritime heritage. So the Honor Frost Foundation is actually now completely taking this building under their wings to actually reconstruct it, rebuild it, including the structural damage that was done and the facade. And you can currently see it on the highway as you're driving by. So we just started that reconstruction, and we're hoping for a lot more like that.
Thank you so much for your valuable insight. I wish we had more time to discuss even the notion that Dr. Claire mentioned before, the rapid reconstruction that actually caused even more harm to the heritage structures on the long run. But I'm afraid we're tight on time. Maybe we'll address it later on in another panel. But we know that Beirut Heritage Initiative have also coordinated with UNESCO on the ground with few work. And
we have several.
Yeah, we have Dr. Chiara Bardeschi, who holds a PhD in the Near Eastern archaeology. She's also the coordinator of the culture program within the Beirut initiative with more than 20 years of experience. Before I ask Chiara for your intervention, I'm gonna put on a small video. We can watch it together that talks about the Beirut initiative. So I'm gonna share my screen now. Okay. So Dr. Chiara, as mentioned before, UNESCO mobilized, So Dr. Chiara, as mentioned before, UNESCO mobilized key stakeholders from Lebanon and abroad to coordinate emergency measures to safeguard the city's damaged heritage and launched the Beirut initiative, as we've seen in the video. 8 months after the blast, how did the coordination efforts facilitate the restoration? And how is Beirut initiative planning to move forward in targeting not only the restoration of architectural heritage, but also the revival of cultural life?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And well, first, thank you for this invitation, opportunity to share experience and contribute to this indeed important forum on restoring cultural heritage in a perspective of going beyond crisis. And the presence of so many partners in this event show clearly the wide commitment of civil societies, as also mentioned before by Dr. Malleson in her speech, and how crucial is a wide transversal stakeholders' commitment at different levels for such an objective. 8 months after the blast, as you mentioned, Beirut initiative, Beirut, and I'm starting from there. Beirut is a UNESCO initiative, Beirut in Arabic for Beirut, an international campaign which was launched in the aftermath of the explosions on 27th of August by UNESCO Director General with the view to support rehabilitation of schools and education, heritage buildings, museums, galleries, and the creative economy. All of which have been particularly challenged and are still today in a dire, unprecedented situation due to the explosion. In addition to the impact of the explosions, we all know the additional burden of the situation in Lebanon in terms of financial crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, but also some, I would say, pre-disaster weakness in terms of the viability of protection of the of heritage and its legal and institutional framework. It was already done in the two previous speech mentioned about, in particular, the little protection, especially for modern heritage. And I would just like to add on this issue that according to the Directorate General for Antiquities, only 1% of this unique heritage, which is very fragile in terms of protection, is listed and protected effectively. And as well, the issue of skills, little, I would say, professional qualification in artisanal jobs related to recovery and reconstruction, as already anticipated in a previous speech. The Beirut initiative is for culture is articulated over two intertwined and of equal values in terms of hierarchy components. The first component, it's really to safeguard the heritage and the urban heritage and its built environment with associated livelihood in a more holistic perspective. According to UNESCO approach, and especially in line with the UNESCO historic landscape recommendation, which this year it's having its 10th anniversary, the city is conceived as a cultural construct where social fabrics and built heritage are strictly linked. And why I'm saying this? Because it's evident how culture is fundamental for the recovery and the reconstruction if this wants to be inclusive and sustainable and resilient. What has been done, the second component, is the relaunching of cultural life and assisting artists, cultural businesses, intangible cultural heritage, tradition and bearers of traditional know-how to restart their activities and contribute in a cascade effect, if I may say, to a regeneration process and therapeutic, I would say, healing cultural approach against the despair of inhabitants populations. We know that we are facing a phenomenon like gentrifications of affected areas in terms also of exodus of artists, of all this vibrant, emerging and very young creativity which was populating the area, and also diversity in the and richness of heritage and the population of the area. In line with these two main components, as I said, strictly interlinked, UNESCO has been assisting and contributing to a definition of first in the assessment and the understanding of this context, both in terms of heritage, but also in terms of intangible cultural heritage and creative industries. And this mainly through the some assessments which were conducted between September and October through consultations with different stakeholders, with artists, with in the different domains, from cinema, audiovisual studios, independent public publishing association networks, through craftsmen and the artists and so on. And of course, the relevant concerned different authorities, professional orders. From day two was part of the this important efforts of assistance of the Directorate General for Antiquities within the Bach initiative, the Beirut Assist Cultural Heritage, close to many others, national and international, to coordinate, understand, and also identify priorities domain. For the where do we stand at this point? At this point, in terms of the first component, urban and built heritage, rehabilitation and assistance, Beirut has been mainly in close cooperation with the Directorate General of Antiquities, has been operating along the three main axes. The first is the urgent measures, especially in terms of propping, structural consolidation and shelters, especially in view of the rainy season, which between October and December was particularly also strong, and with damage to the damage. Through this access, at this day, thanks to UNESCO Heritage in Emergency Funds and the contributions of Germany, 14 heritage buildings in Remail, Saifi, Medawer could be stabilized and are secured. There is another component, which is institutional capacity and the relevance of documentation. As you know, for any emergency intervention, as well as for more long-term approach in a rehabilitation design project and even planning, documentation is crucial. And in this sense, UNESCO has been assisting Directorate General of Antiquities in building up a core unit for documentation of heritage and urban fabric, in particular to achieve in a 3D georeferenced model. This model is an open platform making use of innovative technologies, aerial views, and even drones that will also serve for to be additionally fed with layers like intangible cultural heritage data, creative sector data to prepare a more coordinated and structured response on the more long term, and federation of different partners as stakeholders. Beside these two activities, there is an important work of advocacy and assistance in terms of the implementation of the provisions set in temporary law 194, where Article 7 mandates Ministry of Culture, Directorate General of Antiquities to elaborate a protection and rehabilitation plan for the impacted, damaged areas. Here, there are many aspects which are fundamental, especially also in terms of correlation of this plan with the more wider territorial approach in terms of management and plans of cities, and more in general also in terms of national strategy. Within this effort, there are important issues which could start, and we are just at the beginning in terms of assistance for mapping of urban heritage attributes, values, and significance of urban identities, spaces, not only buildings, but also public spaces which are relevant for societal and social cohesion events, and re-insulting within the cities and the communities' resilience, and also in terms of defining criteria. And this action, as I said, requires a strong involvement also by very different stakeholders, starting from DGA, national, international experts, professional orders like the Order of Architect and Engineer, BHI, and and of course municipalities, universities, which are have a fundamental role also in the more long-term perspective. You mentioned at the beginning as in terms of cultural life. This second component is focusing as in revamping cultural life to the assistance to the creative and cultural industries, business, artists, cultural producers, and community-led initiatives to restart creative business, artistic creation, and regeneration, I was saying, of the city to this cascade effect phenomenon. Within this component, starting from assessment, consultations with different partners, national and international, through also funding received from pledged from the UNESCO Heritage and Emergency Fund, but also UNESCO member states like Iceland, Kuwait. It was possible to start very little, I would say, compared to the need activities, and in particular to focus on co-production of artistic co-production. It is important indeed to keep this in UNESCO perspective, and according to its conventions, and in particular 2005 Convention regarding cultural diversity, to keep this trans-sectorial approach through the different domains of creative sector, because are all linked one another. to provide a more transversal assistance. We could only start a few activities, as I mentioned, in terms of identifying some co-production and working in terms of preparing for cultural events, activities benefiting the communities and community-led, in terms of safeguarding some and put in safety some of the cultural places, but very little in number yet. And even in terms of starting looking at the restoration and repair of damaged modern Lebanese artist masterpiece which have been damaged during the explosion. This second component, cultural life, that it's certainly crucial for the relaunching of life and the vibrant life of Beirut. It's so far, although recognized one very important, crucial for the recovery and the reconstruction of the city, very little funded. And indeed, there is an important work to be conducted and continued, and UNESCO stands ready to continue advocating in this direction, and also to support the different stakeholders, and in particular the most vulnerable artists and segments of the sector, to ensure that a favorable environment for their transmission is set. This can only be achieved if there is a strong cooperation and synergies among all these activities. And we are really very delighted that all these, I would say, pieces are growing and put progressively together, starting from this strong commitment of civil societies and other partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chiara. I'm afraid we're out of time, so we won't be able to take questions from our listeners. Thank you all for attending, and I would like to thank our speakers again for participating in this discussion. And as Dr. Chiara mentioned, social fabric and built heritage are closely linked together. So if you don't want history to repeat itself, we need to keep the fight to sustain our tangible and intangible cultural heritage. Thank you all again, and I hope that you will join us tomorrow for our second day, where we will have panels talking about livelihoods, coordination, and mental health. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.